Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. You can find this podcast on youtube.com, enter Annette Talks, and iTunes, or actually I guess it's called Apple Podcasts now, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and some other places. Wherever they have podcasts, you can find it. And today we're going to be talking about one of those other categories. It's not terribly political, but it does have to do with current events. And since I think most of the members, or most of my audience is members of the church, I wanted to talk about something that I'm seeing that's causing a lot of difficulty for some of us, and take this on and come at it from a few different angles and see if we can make some sense of it. And what that is a lot of us are not thrilled with the way the church has been handling the COVID response. And so some of us are starting to get a little frustrated. And so I wanted to reach out to my friend, Jodi Stoddard. Hi, Jodi. And the reason I'm reaching out to Jodi is because she's like, I would say, a big couple of huge giant steps ahead of me spiritually. She's shaking her head for those of that you aren't watching. But I know that she is, and if for no other reason that she spent a lot more time on studying the scriptures than I do right now. Just from the things that I've read from her, I'm just guessing. So I'm borrowing a little bit of her light today. Jodi was on this podcast a few times in the past. We talked about the second coming, and on the other one, we talked about how to respond to our loss of liberty in the last days. And but Jodi put out a video recently. What was it called, Jodi? Something about two testaments?
Two testaments, two ways to receive one people.
Thank you. And when I started writing about some of this on Facebook, Jodi shared it with me. And so it took this from a perspective that helped me out a lot. And so I thought it'd be great if we could chat about it and help out members of the audience that are listening that are feeling the frustration like I am. For example, I just told Jodi this while we were chatting before we started recording, but I just saw an LDS Living email, and it said that something like 60 temples were moving to phase 3, which was thrilling. But neither of the temples in Colorado are going to phase 3. They're only going to phase 2B. And I mean, that's great for, I'm happy for my kids that are going to be able to go do temple or baptisms for the dead. But this means that I'm still not going to be able to go back and do proxy work that I got used to doing at least once a month. And so there's a big part of me that got very upset about that. And because it's been, let's see, what, 14, almost 15 months since most of us have been able to go to the temple. And so I asked my friend who works in the temple recently what she's seeing and why it's taking so long, because, you know, church is back in, we're able to go as many people as we want to church every week. We're not required to all mask up in church anymore, and we'll get to that later. But to me, it's like, so what's the difference between church and temple? Why can't we just get back to the temple? And she said that they're looking at the numbers, the COVID numbers all the time, and that they have to be below a certain number for at least 3 weeks. And if they are for less than 3 weeks and then they dip back or they rise up again, then they start over again with those 3 weeks. And we even did a fast. We had a fast for the temple to reopen a few weeks ago. And I'm watching the numbers here in Denver and thinking, yeah, we're going to be open, and then to not open. So frustrating. And then the other things that I think a lot of us have been frustrated with are, I guess I'm just going to vent for a while and then let Jodi talk me down because I have a lot to vent about. And judging by what's on Facebook, as far as the posts, comments on my posts, and instant messages that I'm getting from people, the things that we're frustrated with, number one, is that the church has encouraged us to receive the vaccine, including our prophet. And then it was us being encouraged to wear masks. And then more recently, we were told, and this is, you know, I think trickling down from the CDC, that if you were fully vaccinated, you no longer had to wear the mask. The implication being that if you were one of the unclean like myself who is not vaccinated, then we're supposed to wear the mask. So just recently, several people received an email from their stake presidency saying that if you're fully vaccinated, you can not wear a mask to church. And then there was some verbiage that's probably different from every stake presidency, but that if you're not vaccinated, you should continue to wear the mask. And our email from our stake presidency at the end encouraged us to get vaccinated. So a lot of us feel like, no, we're not going to wear the mask because we have personal reasons why, and a lot of it is logic. If you're wearing a mask, you're protected. So why do I need to wear one? And if you have a vaccine, you're protected. So why do I need to wear one? I'm just not going back to wearing a mask to church. And judging by church, most people are feeling the same way because I only saw maybe a handful of people still wearing them, and that's their business. But in my mind, if you're encouraging some people to wear it and some people don't, you're creating a two-tier system, which I feel like is divisive, and I don't like it. It's one thing if you're asking people to make their own choice, you can volunteer whether to do it, but to say you should, I just think it's wrong. And I feel like the church is catering to the most fearful amongst us instead of not the least fearful amongst us. So thank you for waiting through all that, Jodi.
Well, as you do, I have so many thoughts, and then I'm like, well, now I got to organize them so I can address your questions.
There's so much, and it changes daily. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I said, it was just today that I got the email saying that our temple's only going to 2B, and it feels like a common theme. Like the church is being as ultra conservative as you can get, as far as taking the most careful path that you can possibly take. And for those of us who have never been, I have not been afraid. I mean, maybe the first week I was like waiting for those ambulances to come, in March of 2020. But since then, as time has gone by and I've watched and seen things with my own eyes and thought things through, and still I do not have anybody I've personally known who's died of COVID after all these months. I have been not afraid, but 99% of the time, not afraid. Frustrated, yes, not afraid. So when I see the church doing this, it's so hard for me to not be frustrated and angry and resentful. So you put out this video, and I think it's partly an answer to some of this, right?
That's kind of what spearheaded it. And I really didn't want it to be necessarily focused on C-19 or the jab, but I wanted to more address the problem. The bad news is, Annette, this isn't going to be the only time we're going to face issues like this coming in the future. It's just going to get worse. There's going to be more issues when it's going to feel more divided. So we have to find a way to navigate through that.
Well, you know what? And this is the other thing. I think I need to insert this in here really quick, because I'm 52 and I don't think there's ever been a time that I have felt like I disagreed with the prophet. And so maybe that's just me. Like the time that I've grown up in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and then, 21st century, I've always agreed with everything the prophet has said. Like there's never been a time where I'm like, I disagree with the prophet. And I've never had stake leaders or area authority do things. Well, that's not true. There's probably been times stake level or bishop level where I've disagreed, but not on anything big, right? I mean, I've always been fairly clear on I'm obedient to what the church tells me to do, but especially obedient to what the prophet says. So this is the first time in my life, and I think a lot of other people are feeling the same way, who are my age or around my age, maybe within 20 years, who are like, well, I am really not comfortable in this place. And that's where I'm at. That's why it's hard for me. Now, if I had been one of those people who's always questioned the prophet, then maybe this would be more comfortable for me, but I'm not. And so, in a similar track, I've never been that questioning of the government. I mean, I've disliked a lot of government policy, but it's never been to the level where I am now, where I distrust more than I trust from the government. And so it's almost like a dual track here of like, I'm starting to question everything. And it makes me uncomfortable when it comes to the prophet and the stake presidency. But I wrote an email to the stake president last year about the masks. and to the bishop, and I really pushed back. And that's the first time that I've ever pushed back on church leaders. And so it's hard to make that adjustment in my mind from whatever the prophet says is true and I need to go along with it, to all of a sudden like, well, I don't agree with the prophet. That's really hard for me. So your video kind of helped me deal with that. So sorry.
Well, prophets are important. They lead us to Christ. And I think one of the problems that we've been living in a bubble in our country and in the church, because everything has just been easy to do, easy to believe, easy to, we're Pollyanna. We're in a Pollyanna mindset. And now suddenly we're faced with a new choice. President Nelson has been saying since he became the prophet, seek to be taught by the Lord himself, hear him. And he even said at one point, and I'm not quoting verbatim, but basically, I'm here to point the way to Christ. You need to follow Christ. And I think the vernacular in our church has been follow the prophet. And I think that that's hurting us, and it's hurting our children, because it's causing us to want to be fed by the prophet, even though he's usually speaking for the Lord, but not to seek it for ourselves. And so we don't seek personal revelation. We don't seek confirmation from the Lord that what he's saying is true. And if you look through history, sometimes the prophets are wrong. And I want to that doesn't mean the Lord can't work with them. It doesn't mean they aren't needed and lead us to Christ, but sometimes they err. And just an example of this is, if let's say you were living in the 1800s and you had listened to Joseph before he was martyred, and now you have the prophet Brigham, you're listening to him, and Brigham starts teaching the Adam God theory. And you're sitting in a congregation and you're like, part of that I can understand, but part of it doesn't feel right through the Spirit. Meanwhile, Orson Pratt might stand up and he might teach how God is omniscient. And so you're going to be conflicted because those are two different theologies. And what happened is that actually Brigham would get angry with Orson and say, stop teaching that way. And Orson would say, okay, I'm sorry, I won't teach that way anymore. And then Brigham would even say, you need to teach the Adam God theory, because that's what I'm teaching. And Orson said, I can't. It goes against my conscience. I don't believe it. And so at one point, Orson even said, I'll step down as an apostle if you want. And half of the apostles said, no, stay here. So he stayed, but he did get demoted in his seniority. So imagine that you're in congregations and you're hearing these two conflicting doctrines. Well, after Brigham died, within the next prophet or two, then the Adam God theory was disavowed by the church. They're like, no, we don't believe that. So if you were in that congregation in the 1800s listening to Orson, and then you listen to Brigham, how are you going to feel? It's going to be a conflict for you. Or maybe it wasn't for them. Maybe they were used to it, because there was a lot of differences of opinion among the apostles and prophets then. So, they'd grown up also, and most of them were converts. So in congregations where different pastors would preach different sermons. So are you going to feel guilty because you're not believing what Brigham's saying? Even though Brigham was wrong, at least according to what the prophets have said since his time, he was wrong. So, or was Orson guilty for not preaching what Brigham was preaching? So that's kind of where we're getting back to again. We've had this wonderful period of time where we've been spoon-fed by the prophets, and we haven't had to rely on personal revelation, and we've just been able to do what they've said, and we've been safe. But even they have said, according to my understanding and what I've heard, is that they don't always agree, and that they will sit before making any policy change or doctrinal comments or whatever, which most everything they've been making has been policy related and not doctrinally related, but they will sit and wait. And if it's a couple of years before they come to a consensus, they wait. So taking that example back to the children of Israel, and I covered this in the video, and I hope that you'll go and watch the video, and Annette, you have permission to share that link.
I'll link to that.
Okay. Because taking things out of context can make it seem weird or anti-prophet, and I'm not anti-prophet, I'm not anti-church at all. Like, where else would I go, Lord? Where else would we go? This is the best place. So, but taking it back to Moses and the children of Israel, Moses went up and talk to God. God says, go down and sanctify your people and tell them to come up and get the word from me. So Moses went back down. He said, sanctify yourselves and come up and see the Lord. And they're like, oh no, the mountain is shaking. There's fire up there. You go see what he wants. That's where we're stuck right now. They have the opportunity to go up and be taught by the Lord himself. President Nelson is telling us, seek to be taught by the Lord himself. If you don't, you won't survive what's coming. Those are his words. So how do we do that? How do we move from being spoon-fed by a prophet to going up the mountain? It takes a lot of work. You can't just like knock on a door and the Lord opens it and said, here I am. You have to work on becoming sanctified. You have to work on understanding Christ. You have to be more servant. It's a big sacrifice, but we need to do that. And our prophet is telling us we need to do that. And there's multiple reasons for that. For one thing, when Moses came down initially, he had the higher law, and he comes down to a people who are worshiping a golden calf. Well, obviously they're not ready for that higher law. And when he went up the first time, the 70s went up with him. That's where we get our 70. 70 people went up with him. So we get our 70s from that. So then he goes back up and he gets a lower law from the Lord. But they have the opportunity for the higher law. So does the Lord give varying levels of law to people depending on their spirituality and what they're ready for? Yes. President Nelson and the prophets of the church have to teach the masses. They're teaching to converts. They're teaching to the masses where people are growing spiritually at different levels. Over and over again in the scriptures, and I have another whole video on this, on the mysteries, it tells us to seek the mysteries. They're not going to be taught over the pulpit. So getting back to the current issues, there isn't a one size fits all. We can have the faith to be healed by everything without any arm of the flesh involved. And sometimes if I have a headache, I can pray it away, or I can use some essential oils. Other times I reach for a Tylenol. It depends on my level of faith. It depends how much energy I have. And I think that's where it's going to be for all of us. It's not going to be a one answer fits all. There's going to be different answers for different people. The prophet's going to give us basically a lower level law that everyone can live, because that's the grace of God. He gives us what we can handle. But for those who want a higher law, then we can go seek that and see what he teaches us. And maybe he'll say, you're not ready to take those training wheels off, sister. You just get back on that tricycle. And we're not ready, and that's okay too. But we'll all eventually get where we need to be.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth on, because I keep hearing different things from different people, and you see different posts and different opinions, and that the fact that the prophet got the vaccination. I mean, he's in his 90s, for the love of all that's holy. So to me, that's like, well, that makes sense for someone who's in their 90s. They're obviously the most at-risk group that there is. And so when I see that he's gotten it, and I don't know if all the apostles have gotten it or not, I'm just guessing that they have, but they're all also in that same risk group. Most of them are in their 70s or 80s. And so I don't think that the vaccination is a dangerous thing, that the prophet's leading us all astray and saying, go take this poison so you can all be poisoned. Some people, I think that, I don't know. But then on the other hand, you have people that think, well, I saw this post, my sister shared this post with me from someone, and it gave me pause, but it didn't tick me off. It said, the prophet asked us to fast for an end to this COVID. And so we all fasted for a miracle. And then this vaccine was produced and it was a miracle. And now that miracle is here, if you're not taking it, I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically saying, if you're not taking it, you're a bad member of the church, because, we made this miracle come about and now you don't want any part of it. So that you're trying to guilt us all. And for me personally, I'm 52. I've analyzed this thing to death. I've looked at it from that aspect of, okay, the prophet's taken it, he's encouraged it. The stake presidency has taken it, or at least they've encouraged it. A lot of people are getting it. But I look at it like, I'm 52, I'm a little chubby, but I'm not super, overweight. I just had my A1C levels come back to me today. I'm not diabetic, I'm not pre-diabetic. I don't have any underlying health issues. I'm not concerned. But I've seen people have things happen to them who've got the vaccine that is concerning. So when I balance it out, I say, I'm not worried. My worry level about COVID is like down to the ground. I'm not worried about COVID at all. My worry about the vaccine is up a little bit, maybe 10, 20%. So logic says, well, don't take the vaccine then, because you don't think it's going to help you. It's not going to prevent you from getting anything that you're worried about, but you have a little concern about what vaccine has done to other people. So not going to get it. And I feel comfortable with that. Nothing has come along to change that opinion. Like just pure logic. Like I haven't even prayed about it because pure logic says there's no reason for me to even pray about it and go to the next step of should I take this vaccine? Now, if I were if I were over 70 or maybe even over 60 or had some other underlying health concern, then I probably would change that calculus a little bit and then probably go pray about it. But I don't see that I'm any way in the wrong for looking at it completely logically and making that decision.
Well, first of all, what's doctrine versus what's an opinion? And the prophet did say, check with your doctor. And then he came out and said, and pray about it. Mm-hmm. So it's an individual decision. It's not for everybody, but he's just getting it. He's saying, I'm getting it. You go pray about it. See what you want to do. Again, it's hard. It's a hard decision because I felt by the Spirit not to. Of course, I had COVID, but then they're even saying people that had COVID should get it. But I haven't felt the need to do that for me personally, for various reasons. But we can't, anytime we're pointing the finger of scorn at others and saying, you're not worthy, you're not following the gospel, you're not getting inspiration, you're not following the prophet, you're not following the Lord, then we are in the great and spacious building. There's no foundation under that building. Because again, it is an individual spiritual journey. And this doesn't have anything to do with doctrine even. I mean, so it does get very confusing and very frustrating. And so on either side of it, whether we believe you shouldn't get one or you should get one, we shouldn't be pointing the finger of scorn. And we can get personal revelation on that answer for ourselves.
Well, and that you raise a good point there, because it's not doctrine. And when the prophet asked us to fast about it, instantly, yeah, of course, I will go along and fast about it. Just like when the stake presidency came out and said, the area presidency fast about getting the temple back open. Of course, I'm going to jump right on that and do that, because to me, that's a completely different issue rather than getting a vaccine.
Well, even I share in the video a quote by Joseph, and he said that he stood up in front of a large congregation and he encouraged them to seek healing through faith first, through blessings, priesthood blessings. And if that didn't work, to then turn to mild food and prayer and rest or something, but that he didn't want people to turn to medicine. And that's the word he used, was medicine. And so again, one of the arguments I'm hearing right now too, and we're just using this current event as an example, but there's going to be more examples like this coming up. I'm hearing the argument of, well, we need to listen to our current prophet and not the past prophets. Well, okay, but if you're trying to make a studied, educated decision and then go prayerfully to get an answer, then we aren't going to study. And if you're going to say not to pay attention really to what the past prophet says, well, then that negates all the scriptures.
I was just going to say,
they were all written by ancient prophets and modern prophets. And so again, do we only listen? If you lived during the time of Joseph Brigham and John Taylor, you would have heard three different doctrines, or at least Brigham in the middle was erring and on several doctrines, not just the Adam God theory. And so then you're going to be like this. Mm-hmm. The only way you can know where truth is to seek personal revelation and get that for yourself.
And the main thrust of your video was that at some point we're not going to have a prophet. And so when you did a video on the second coming and you made some educated guesses that it was coming within the next few years or so. I forget that for a while. I mean, obviously we don't know that. It's just an educated guess. Again, I still hope for it. I'm still rooting for that. But if it is soon, or maybe even if it isn't soon, we don't know, but it could be soon. Let's say it is, let's say it's in the next 10 years. Gosh, please let it be. Then in your video, you talk about how we're not going to have a prophet during the millennium. We're going to have Christ who is going to be ruling, which I'm all for. I so look forward to the millennium. I look forward to the second coming because I don't want to have to worry about who's running our country anymore. And so that it would be awesome to have Christ just ruling the world. But what you said is if we don't have a prophet anymore, we're going to be getting our revelation directly from the Savior. And so we're not going to just flip a switch from now until then. Let's say the second coming is next year. It's not like, or 2023. Let's just say it's 2023 or 2020, 2024, just for kicks. It's 2024. Here it is.
It's probably at least 2027, but okay.
But let's just say just for kicks, it's 2024. It's not like New Year's Eve 2023, switch flips and we're like, I'm so good at receiving personal revelation now. I'm all good. This is going to be awesome. The millennium is going to be so great because I now have that skill. It just magically came to me, right? And so we have to develop that skill. Well, and I'm really glad that President Nelson, who I'm not following as far as the vaccine goes right now. I mean, I'm making the decision for myself. So in that I am following it. Is the prophet that has been so encouraging and admonishing us to hear him. And he didn't say, hear me. He said, hear him. Oh, you know what? Something else is funny. On the last Come Follow Me Book of Mormon Central video, Tyler and Taylor, they do those. I can't remember which apostle it was. It's a current one though. But he said, they had a quote where he said something about someone asked him a question to something he didn't know the answer to. And he said, just because we're general authorities doesn't mean we're authorities in general. And so they don't know everything about everything. And so obviously they are going to take educated guesses sometimes or give opinions sometimes. But I'm really glad that President Nelson is really making that push for us to increase our personal revelation because, as you say in your video, we're not going to have a prophet during the millennial reign.
Yeah, I don't think we are, based on the fact that all the prophets will be turning their keys over to Adam at Adam and Diamond, and then Adam will turn them all over to Christ, who will then take over the ruling of his kingdom. And so we know that much. Now, there'll probably be an organization of some sort. There usually is. I think heaven's organized. I think the spirit world is organized. But we have to get to the point where we just know. I mean, how awesome would that be to get up in the morning, and we can practice it now. And that's the really cool part, is you get up in the morning and you're like, okay, Lord, these are the things I think I should do today. What do you think? Is there anything else you want me to do? Help me be aware of the Spirit as I go through my day. If there's someone I can help or something I need to do or learn or seek or whatever. And so we can practice that now, and we can get to the point where we can be in tune more of the time, and all these blessings will flow. So we get to practice it. But eventually during the millennium, I think we'll probably just all kind of have learned to live that way, and we'll just know what we need to do. And, you know, one of the things that the prophet's been pounding home is ministering. We changed the whole vernacular of visiting and home teaching to ministering. And so that's going to be super important. It should be important now, not just ministering to those that we're assigned to, but ministering to the world, ministering to anyone who has needs. And that will be a big, huge part of who we are during the millennium.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, every once in a while I'll have one of those really high spiritual moments where like I feel like I'm operating at full spiritual capacity for like 5 seconds. And I think I was at McDonald's with my girls, and I was looking around. This was back when you're allowed to go inside, you know, hang out at the play place and stuff. By the time the play places reopen, my girls will be too old for them. But anyway, and I remember looking around the restaurant and thinking about ministering and thinking, we are not here to just minister to those people that we've been officially assigned to. We are actually here to minister to anyone and everyone that we come in contact with that we perceive a need in. Like, right. I should be able to look around me and spiritually realize, if I don't see it with my physical eyes and my, you know, with my physical senses, to be able to spiritually perceive someone needs my help. This person could use my assistance in this way. This person needs me to say hi. This person needs me to smile. Maybe that person needs $5 that I could give him out of my wallet. Like that's where we should be, like these spiritual ninjas that can or Star Wars, the Force. We should have that Force with us all the time that tells us what we need to know at any given moment. Like how the spiritual with us is our constant companion, right? That's what the blessing that we're supposed to be living up to all the time.
What are you describing? You're describing Zion.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're trying to work toward. You're describing Zion. So where we don't need to be told by our bishop which people to go minister to. Mm-hmm. The ward is all taken care of because we're all unified in the spirit. We all know who needs what, and we just do it and take care of it. That's Zion.
That is Zion. And it makes me think how far we are. And one of the hard parts of this COVID thing, and I have to admit a lot of it, I just do to myself. I've got to repent and fix this. But there was so much potential for divisiveness with the masks, because I go to church and I see the masks and instantly my brain starts going, well, why are they still wearing masks? And judge, even though, when we were wearing the masks for so long, every week I had to prime myself before going to church to not be upset that I'm going to be wearing a mask through church, right? So finally we get to take them off. And what did my brain do? Why are they wearing a mask? It's like, okay, really, this is not helping. This is not conducive to the spirit.
So I had one friend who said this, and it's just very simple, and it helps me when my mind starts going there. Jesus unites, Satan divides. So anything that you think that is a uniting thought, that's good. Otherwise, it's bad. And then a new one that I've taken on as my new mantra that one of my sons shared with me is honor agency while staying in charity. Honor agency while staying in charity. So anytime you're in a situation where you start to feel frustrated or feel like your freedom or agency is being taken away, or somebody else is not exercising their agency correctly, whatever that, including your kids, which they can be the best teachers. Honor their agency to yell and scream and tell you that they hate you, but stay in charity and love them as best you can as Christ would, and allow them that journey. And I think a lot of times, especially at church, we're not allowing other people that journey. And so then they come up against this wall where they either have to choose to leave or stay because they feel judged, they feel condemned, they feel that they're not allowed to go through their own thought process and their own growth and changes spiritually because other people are telling them what to think and telling them what to do. And Joseph was worried about that. In fact, I have quotes from a lot of different prophets who said, we worry that people will become so dependent on what we say that they won't seek more spiritual learning. They won't seek more inspiration from the Lord, more further light and knowledge. And again, we're not all going to get the same light and knowledge at the same time because we're all different beings. Even Christ was perfect. And he was with his disciples every day for 3 years. And he still had a hard time getting them to wrap their minds around what he was trying to teach them because we're all so different and we learn in different ways and at different speeds. So we really have to honor people's agency and stay in charity and realize that we're really not that far ahead of anybody else on the world when we compare ourselves to Christ. We're all kind of in the same, we're all kind of little toddlers. We're just toddlers or infants even in the gospel. We have a long way to go.
Yeah, it's like Christ is the sun up in the sky and we're down on ladders. I'm like, well, I'm the one step higher on the ladder than you are.
Right.
Christ is up there in the sky going,
It's going to take you more to build that Tower of Babel, that.
No difference. Yeah. No Tower of Babel. It is kind of a Tower of Babel comparison, actually, if you think about it. We're thinking we're higher than somebody.
Well, and I think, too, we have this, we read about the story of the Rameumptom in the Book of Mormon. And yet, I think often we are the Rameumptomites. We get up there and pound our chests on Fast and Testimony meeting of how we are, how wonderful we are because the Lord chose us to be in this gospel. but yeah, and it is a blessing. But again, we have to stay in charity and honor other people's levels wherever they are. So
I need to remember that, especially because I have a daughter that just turned 12 recently, and her favorite new word is no. Just automatically. Belle, I need to do this. No. Okay. No stopping to think about it. Just no. Okay. So I think I'm gonna put that on huge letters, put it on the wall somewhere where I can see it. So help me to reframe the way I'm thinking about like the church not opening the temple up, even though to me, like logically, I say they should all just be thrown open wide.
okay, well, first of all, if it opens at all, we're going to be extremely blessed if it opens in your area, because in Revelation 15 verse 8, John says that the temples will close until the 7 angels have poured out the 7 destructions. So if the temple's open again now, they're going to close again. So hurry and get out there and get your work done, because once the tribulations start, and maybe that won't be 10 years from now, but once the tribulations start, the temples will close until they're over. So get any extra work and spiritual feeding that you need done. But again, I think it all goes back to me. I have to seek personal revelation. I have to realize that the world is messed up. Babylon's messed up. The prophets have to make decisions based not just for the United States, but on the whole world. And I just have to find other ways to be spiritually fed while waiting for the temple to open. And again, personal revelation. I have actually sat through sacrament before. When I was the chorister, I loved it because I got the sacrament first, and then I could just close my eyes and really commune with the Lord. And then, I knew when the sacrament was coming again because there was a prayer. Now I have to, I'm sitting in the congregation. I'm like, have to leave my eyes open because I don't want somebody going, hello, wake up, the sacrament. And so waiting for the sacrament. But so I don't really get into that zone as much as I did before. But I have had some experiences during the sacrament that were just as spiritual or more so than I've had in the temple. So there's other ways to get that, to be spiritually fed.
That's a good reminder, because I try every week that the weather allows. I do this hike up on this bluff here locally, where when you get up to the top, you can see like everything. You can see the temple, actually. Every time I go up there, I'm like, oh, I can find the temple. But and I don't listen to music. I just start a prayer. I open the prayer as soon as I start walking up the mountain, and I keep that prayer going for the 45 minutes or so it takes me to do this little hike. And I've gotten most of my revelation during those hikes or my daily walks when I can't get to the mountain. So I'm glad that you reminded me of that, because there have been other ways that the Lord has replaced the temple experience during COVID for me. Like the first 16 weeks I was teaching gospel doctrine on Facebook every week. Gosh, those were super spiritual weeks for me. So I need to do that. Yeah, I think I need to reframe and stop kicking against the pricks and start seeking to understand rather than to just get frustrated, like using personal revelation instead of just my own logic, because obviously I'm missing something. And so
well, you're not the only one struggling. And I know it was so interesting because in a lot of the Facebook groups and stuff that I'm in, normally everyone was super excited for a conference. We start talking about it 8 weeks ahead and start counting down the weeks and the days till conference. But this last conference, there was a different feeling, and people were saying, I'm concerned about what the brethren are going to say, which said to me that they've been concerned about what the brethren were saying, over the whole COVID issue, over whatever, that they weren't in line anymore with what the brethren were saying. And that was a concern to them. And like you shared, it is a concern when you're not in line, but there are going to be times when you're not going to be for whatever reason. And there are good, better, and best. Not everything that we get, we're often just fed the good and maybe the better, but the best often comes directly from the Lord and understanding what he wants for us.
Well, and we hear the same things at conference time and time again, because obviously we're not ready to get anything stronger from the brethren, because a lot of us are still drinking the milk instead of ready to eat the meat. And so if we're just relying on conference for everything, we're missing a lot.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm glad you reminded me of that too, because I really looked forward to conference, except that I didn't want to see them wearing the masks, because that's always hard for me to see people wearing masks. But again,
drives me crazy when people go outside and they're wearing them outside.
yeah,
And I just want to be like, oh my gosh, my head is going to explode.
I know. I guess I don't have enough empathy for the people that are afraid, because the politicians and media have done such a good job of scaring everyone to death that a lot of them just are not ready to not be afraid. It's going to take a while to pull them out of that fear. You know, all of a sudden I get to stop wearing a mask. I mean, it's just, there's no like logic to, okay, take off your mask. Like, anyway, all right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to pick your brain about, or do you have anything else you want to add? I think that we need to remember we need to be looking for our own personal revelation is the hugest of this, and that the prophet's not always speaking doctrinally. When he speaks, not always speaking as a prophet, and that we need to be more of a Zion people. That's something that's sticking with me. What else do you think that we need to convey?
I think that that's probably most of it. I mean, it is hard as we begin to receive personal revelation from the Lord, and we've already discussed how sometimes it will be different than what he gives to the masses, that there is this pull. And as we start to step across the threshold between this telestial world and the terrestrial millennial world, as we get closer to that and we learn to communicate directly with the Lord, you do feel more of this tug of war going on within yourself, because we've always been taught to follow the prophet, and he is vital, he is important. In his main job is to point the way to Christ. We just need to believe him in that. We need to believe that we do need to be seeking to be taught by the Lord himself. And that's a phrase from President Nelson. And just kind of grow up. It's time to kind of take our training wheels off and try it a little, see how wobbly we are. But we still need, most of the time to compare what we're getting spiritually, because it is possible to be deceived, but we don't need to be afraid of being deceived. That goes back to the word of fear, because what happened to Joseph when he first went to the grove? Satan came down and tried to scare him out of it. Don't pray, it's horrible, don't pray. And so as we start to move into new areas that the Lord wants us to move into, Satan's going to try to stop us. There's going to be fear, but we are already deceived if we think that we can't communicate with the Lord. So trying to communicate with the Lord and being wrong once in a while, I compare it to a 3-year-old who decides to go make his bed. Nobody's told him. He just goes and makes his bed. And then he calls his parents in and says, look what I did. Are they going to scream and yell at him and ground him and spank him and send, because he did a horrible job? No, they're going to say, good job. That was great motivation. Let me show you this little trick next time you can try, until the child learns to make a bed perfectly. And that's how it's going to be for us. As we seek personal revelation from the Lord, we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to get it right. If the prophet doesn't get it right all the time, we're obviously not going to get it right all the time. And again, he's getting inspiration for the world. We're getting it for ourselves and our family. So we have to practice and not be afraid of it. And if we do mess up, the Lord's going to love us. And as long as our hearts stay pure and turn toward him, then we will be okay. He'll make it right. He'll help us see and adjust and straighten out the corners on the bed until we can make a perfect bed.
Thank you. And one of the other things I want to mention is in the video, you said how sometimes if there's something the prophet says that you're not sure about, you put it on the shelf and then you let the Spirit teach you about it. And so you just put it up there until you get some answers about that. I like that. Instead of just saying, oh, the prophet's a false prophet, the church isn't true, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't have to go there. Just take it, put it on the shelf. Just like with a lot of things in life, there are so many things in life that we don't get answers for, sometimes for months, years, decades, maybe not till the next life. And so we just put it up on the shelf and we say, well, I'm ready to learn about that, when the Spirit's ready to teach me. So just put it up there. And then the other thing that I really liked that you said was that the prophet's job is to get us to the temple. And when we get to the temple, when we get to the veil, we're supposed to go talk to the Lord. That's our job. So we need to remember that the prophet gets us to the temple, And then we take it from there, and our job is to speak to the Lord. So if we can look at the prophet as our vehicle, almost like he's giving us a ride to the temple. All right, I got you here. We need to remember not to stop there, but when we get there, to go and speak to the Lord.
Exactly.
Or he's taking us to the mountaintop like Moses wanted to. So if we can remember that the prophet gets us to the mountain, and then we get to the top, or he takes us to the top and leaves, then we can turn to the Lord and speak to him. So that's the prophet's job, not to speak for the Lord to us as individuals. He speaks to the church, as a whole. Good. Well, this has helped me out a lot.
Good. It always helps me too when I contemplate again. In fact, I watched my video again this morning or last night, and I was like, wow, I forgot that I put that in there. Oh, wow, that's what I was like listening to somebody else's video, because it's all pretty much the words of the prophets and scriptures anyway. So how many times do I have to listen to them before I believe them or understand them? So yeah.
Yeah, and I will be watching that video again, and I will link to that again. Tell me the title to that again.
2 Testaments, 2 ways to receive, 1 people.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And so I will post that in my show notes, link to it on my Facebook page. And so I encourage you listeners to go and watch. I put it at 1 1/4 speed, which probably people do with my episodes. I encourage that too. If you're short on time, speed it up a little bit. Not too much, but enough. So, well, thank you so much, Jodi. It's been wonderful having you on.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And I'm sure I'll be hitting you up again when I start hitting a wall and I need someone to help me out. So we sure appreciate you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you, listeners, for listening. If you ever want to reach out, you can find me at annette@annettetalks.com, send me an email, or go and comment on annettetalks.com. Again, these episodes can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, under Annette Talks, and lots of other places. Well, thanks for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, where freedom lovers gather.